Now let us try the other approach when we want to validate as soon as the user is typing. Is almost the same thing with the difference that we want the onRaw value changed event. Let's add it here. We already used the onValueChanged one. Let's put raw value changed. If you remember, we defined it here inside observables. That is the wrong place. Let us put an init event listeners. Let me create a new property for our prototype. All the event listeners. Let me copy the onValueChanged one. And then let me create this new one equals to function. You can also define a prototype property for each function, so you don't have all in one function. And let me do that, so the code will be cleaner. Let me put the function we'll call the prototype, and we need to bind the scope, and the same for this. And then here we can duplicate that and use the on. Then we will update that. Here we need to clear this. So now we have each listener mapped to a prototype property. That is a function, and we need to bind the customer view model scope to the prototype function. We can use it. Don't forget to get the event. Okay, by the way, let us see if everything is working. Testing, blah blah blah. Yeah, just code refactoring. And now let's change it to JS and see what we need to do. We still have the same array of validators. In this case, it is the same async length validator with a simply max value. And inside the event listener, we just call the validate function for the HTML element we are getting inside the event. Let me copy and paste that. It receives the data from the event. The validator will be the same, and let's see. Let me reload the code. The auto reload was giving me some errors. So I am typing and nothing raw value changed. Oh, I switched. So don't be like me. It's this way, not the other way around. Let me try. Cannot access on input first name row value. So that error probably is because we are setting the first name input value as null in the first place. So we need to check if we have a value. So event.detail.value. If we have a value, we validate that. Yeah, no errors. And as soon as I'm typing, it will say it's too low, and then I have more than 5 characters. It changed the message. If I continue to type, it will say the other error message. So this is an example of how you can have a validation for the length in an input text. You can also add custom validators. Let me show you here an example with JavaScript. So you need to use the async validator. In this case, it is a regex validator. We have different kinds of validators inside the OJET. You can see some examples here: length, number range, required or not. You can also see inside API documentation. And in this case, we just, it's the same way, the same approach. We just need to build a different object to accomplish what we want. And maybe we need to have some logic based on a service value. Imagine we are trying to get the max and minimum value from a service, we need to call the service and only then put the values here. It will be always the same with some tweaks. If you remember, I set the value attribute from the input weight as an empty string, and you can see that an empty string is the default to have a 0 as default value. What I want is to add a step here, so it will show icons to increment the OJET input numbers. You can see that you can increment and decrement. We can also have a minimum value. It can be declared here, or you can give it a read-only variable, min value, and we can populate that inside the JS file. For now, let's put 0. You can also have a maximum value equals to, let's put 5 so we can see. Now, as it is already 0, the down arrow is disabled and we have a message to enter a number between 0 and 5. You can click up and down until 0 and then this arrow will be disabled. We can also add validators here the same way we have in the input text, and let me add a variable. It will be input weight value. Let me put that as the second one and let me declare the value. Let me save, and inside the observables it is after the full name. It will be a null as well. So it's empty and now it's showing to enter a number between 0 and 5. And let's remove the max attribute so you can put a number greater than or equal to 0. There is another way of displaying messages inside the inputs, the OJET components. That is using the messages custom attribute. You can find it inside the forms, then validation. You look to component validation and messages custom. In the HTML, it's simply an attribute. Let's copy that and let us use inside the input number, for instance, at here, and it will be input weight message custom. It will be an observable, so let's have it here. Start by disabled and then messages custom. Put that here. It will be an empty array. If you have an empty array inside your observable, the OJET component will not display any message. If you add an object with the message structure that we need to give to the message custom attribute, then a message will be displayed. Initially add an empty array to the observable, and when we want to display the message, we have that structure. As an example, I will set a timeout here and then we will change it. Let me put like 5 seconds and use a function so I can bind this keyword to it, bind this, and here I want to change the observable. You can have an observable array as it is an array, so we need to change it to a specific object. It will have still an array. You can also use the push method, but I like to replace the observable value. You can see the object structure in the demo.js block of code. It will have a detail with the message and the severity, that is error, info or warning. And the new Redwood theme does not show any summary info, only if you are using an old version of OJET or the Alta theme that is deprecated. We need to give it all the attributes but an empty value in the summary property. Let me copy this and paste here inside an object. For now, let me say testing 1, 2, 3, and it will be an error. So now everything good, and after 5 seconds we have the message. As soon as we change this message custom value, we will display a message. We can put it as warning and we can duplicate that, and after 10 seconds we will have an info message, and after 13 seconds it will be without message again. Testing 1 2 3. Now warning, and then it will disappear. Yeah, this is how it works, by just changing the value inside the message custom attribute, the one we are declaring here. So let's do an approach like on raw value changed, and put that here value, and then let me put value at second attribute on input, and then let me just delete these two. Then I need to copy that last one, duplicate this line, we replace this, go down, duplicate this declaration, use the new one. We don't want to validate, we want to get the const value equals to event.detail.value, and if value equals 2, this that, let me copy that from here, so copy, delete, testing. So we are displaying a message when the user changes the value to be a 2. I forgot to close something, yeah, sorry about that. Yes, is everything right now? Let me save this file as well. So 1 2, nothing happened. So as you can see, it is not working. And why? Because the value here, it is a string and not a number. You can convert that to a number and it will be having the behavior you want. So it's a 2 and we see a message, warning message, and we can have a translation here as well. Let me split that, change this as well. Allow me to put some messages custom dot weight. We need to add that here, so you should have an higher value. Just an example. Let me save that, and we put a 2 and you have that. So you can also validate if it is less than 40, and of course you need to allow the user to have, yeah, we are allowing a minimum value of 0, not a maximum. Right now is null, is a 0, so you must have an higher value, and it will be displaying that same message until we reach the 40, and then we can simply have the value. So this is an example of how to handle messages inside the inputs based on the values. Of course, you can also use the on value changed. I just changed the attribute from on raw to on value changed, and as soon as the value is changed, it will also validate. So basically you can use on value changed or on raw value changed for this. Input number, you can see the attributes, and then we can see the raw value, and we have on raw value change. Raw value is read-only property for retrieving the current value from the input in string form, so that's why we need to change here to number.